Welcome to Monday's edition of Renew Plus. I'm Pastor Tony. Thank you for joining us again today and this week. And we are entering week number 11 of our very important series entitled Faith Life. We have been progressively walking you through how to develop your faith and how to walk and live by this faith. Remember again, God says that the just shall live by faith. And then it says again that we walk by faith and not by sight. So if we're supposed to be living by faith and walking by faith, I believe the Lord will give us instruction on how to work this kind of faith that we're to be living and walking in. Now, for the last couple of weeks or so, we've been talking about the two hinges on which the door of faith swings. Remember, first of all, we talked about the first hinge, believing in the heart. Everything proceeds from the inside out. Everything proceeds from your heart and works outward. See, we must believe what God said about us and what God said to us in His Word. If we do not see ourselves the way God sees us, if we do not believe what God says about us in His Word and what He says to us in His promises, then really faith has nothing to give substance to. We would call that hope. Faith gives substance to the thing that is hoped for on the inside of us. And of course, again, hope is the ability to see something on the inside of you through the eyes of your heart that you cannot see externally on the outside yet. Now, the second one we began talking about last week, the second hinge, which is also very important, and that is speaking with the mouth. Putting forth an expression of your faith in words and releasing those through spoken words out of your mouth. Again, we looked at Romans chapter 10 and it said, "For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation." The initial salvation experience worked by that law of faith, by that operation of faith, which is believing in the heart and then saying with the mouth. Again, notice that he didn't say with the mind. We're not sending telepathic messages, out of our head. No, they're to be spoken out of our mouth. Our words are an expression and a reflection of what we believe in our heart. Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So the words that are coming out of our mouth ought to be expressive of the faith or what we believe in our heart, which should be the Word of God. Now let's go back over to familiar scriptures to us today, found in Mark chapter 11. Mark the 11th chapter, and this is Jesus talking here. Jesus is giving us again some very important instruction on how to work and how to live by this faith. And as we pointed out last week, and you'll see as we read this, these two elements that I was just talking about, believing in the heart, saying with the mouth, are present here in these verses. But of course, this is on the heels of Jesus speaking to a fig tree the day before. He went to see if there were figs on it, and there were no figs on it. Even though it had advertisement on it, had leaves on it, there were no figs there. And so Jesus said, "Let no one eat fruit from you ever again," in response or answering that fig tree. Now, what really was he responding to? Was he just picking on that poor old fig tree? No, Jesus, first of all, did not create that fig tree to be fruitless. He created that fig tree to bear fruit and to meet the needs of mankind. And of course, that is part of the fall of man and the curse. And Jesus dealt a death blow. He's not just referring to the fig tree there. He's referring to the curse. He's referring to the curse of lack and the law of sin and death that was put in motion, activated by Adam in the Garden of Eden. Now, when Jesus said those words, that's all he did. He did not, take an axe to it after that. He didn't tell the boys to go get a saw and let's saw this thing down. No, what did he do? He just simply released faith through words. That's all he did. And then they went on their way, went on to the temple, and then they came back the next day and they saw the fig tree that Jesus had spoken to dried up from the roots. Now, notice right there, it dried up from the roots. Jesus' words, first of all, affected something you could not see below the surface, in the roots. We could say in the spiritual unseen realm. There's many times roots to many things we see present here, undesirable things in our daily life. And Jesus, by speaking to those, showed us that we can speak to undesirable things in our life, and it will affect not just the symptoms or the circumstances, it'll in fact affect the very roots of that situation that go below the surface. See, God is not just about dealing with fruit. He wants to deal with roots. He's not just about dealing with surface issues. He wants to break the cycle of things. So Jesus used this as an example. Let's pick it up, verse 20. It says, "Now in the morning, as they passed by," talking about Jesus and his disciples, "they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, remembering, said to him, 'Rabbi, look, the fig tree which you cursed is withered away.'" I don't think Jesus ever would have even brought that to their attention. He just walked and lived by faith. It was almost second nature to him, to the point that he didn't think about it. But notice that Peter noticed it, the disciples noticed it, brought that to his attention, and Jesus just used that as a platform in order to instruct his disciples and all of us believers on how to use this kind of faith to change our circumstances and situations. Now, verse 22, Jesus answered and said to them, "Have faith in God." We've already looked at that. Other Bible commentaries and other teachers tell us that we could actually translate this or read this verse as saying, "Have faith, the faith of God," or "have the God kind of faith." Notice Jesus is saying, "Have it." In other words, it's available for us. Now, a lot of people would think, well, this is just Jesus, this is just the disciples, and this is not really for us today. Well, let's read on verse 23 and find out that's not true. He said, "For assuredly I say to you, whoever or whosoever says to this mountain." So when he says whosoever, that includes all of us right there. That includes me and you, every generation, every believer right here. It includes anybody that's a whosoever. That would be all of us, wouldn't it? So he said right here, "Have the God kind of faith," verse 22. Then verse 23, he says, "Whosoever." Now notice what he says about the God kind of faith, how it works. Same thing we've been saying, but notice he said, "Whosoever says to this mountain." Isn't that what Jesus did the day before in addressing that fig tree problem? Yes, he did. He said, "Whoever says to this mountain." Obviously, they were close to a mountain there. So Jesus just took it up from a fig tree. They were really impressed by that fig tree, I can tell you. But notice that Jesus didn't just stop there. He didn't put a ceiling on just addressing a small problem like a fig tree. He said, "Whosoever shall say unto this mountain." Boy, he took it up to a level that only the ability and the power of God could do something about. I mean, how many of you know we could probably take an axe or some Roundup or a saw to today we got chainsaws to a tree and cut it down. But notice that Jesus took it out of even the realm of our thinking that maybe we can use our faith and use partially faith in God and partially faith in us. No, he just took it up to something where it is God and God only and God alone right here. Okay? This is the God kind of faith, but the God kind of faith taps us into the God kind of power, the God kind of ability, the God kind of resources. And that's what he's talking about. He says, "Whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things which he says will be done, he will have whatever he says." So let's look at this. He says, "Whosoever," that's you and me, us all of us, "can have whatsoever we say when we believe it in our heart and do not doubt." I know some people have kind of gotten a hold of part of the faith message, and they kind of ran off with that part. If I just say it, a couple of times, it's going to come to pass. Nope. He says, whatever you say in your heart, or whatever you say, believing in your heart with no doubts. See, it must first of all be believing in your heart. That's where it all starts from. But out of your heart flow the issues of life. Out of your heart flow the words, or the God kind of life, which means the God kind of words. And then we speak to mountains, and they're going to come to pass. Now, a lot of people again say, well, if I just say it, it'll come to pass. No, it's not just what you say, it's what you say believing in your heart with no doubting. I just want to make that abundantly clear right here. We're not just talking about hocus pocus, abracadabra. If that were true, then parrots could bring things to pass, because they're speaking words, but they don't have a spirit, they don't have a heart, they don't have heart faith like you and me do. So we're talking about releasing or expressing faith in words released out of our mouth, out of something we are believing in our heart. So again, notice right here that he says, whatever you say will come to pass, if you believe it and do not doubt in your heart. So again, I just want to make this clear. It's not just the saying that's going to cause it to come to pass. Now, saying alone does not make it come to pass, but saying is involved in working faith that brings it to pass. See, we must understand that principle right there, believing in the heart with no doubting, and then speaking with the mouth. Now, this is the way God really originally created all of us to live in. He had created all of us to live according to this principle of faith. So when it says that the just shall live by faith, we can say, by translation here, because of what we understand now, that the just shall live by believing and speaking. By believing and speaking, because that is what constitutes faith. Now, when it says there that this is how the God kind of faith works, we saw last week to some degree that this is how God created the universe. This is how God created things. Let's go back over to Hebrews chapter 11 again. Hebrews the 11th chapter. And notice this. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 3. We read this last week. It says, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God. Now, what is the Word of God? Now, a lot of people just think, well, it's the Word of God, it's the Bible. Well, that contains the words that God spoke, okay, or the words that God had recorded or written for us, for our benefit. But notice that what it's saying there, the worlds were framed by what God said, by His words that proceeded out of His mouth. And then it says, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. In other words, the things that we see around us today, physically, we physically contact this realm that we live in, this physical realm. But this realm did not just create itself, so to speak. I know there's a lot of theories out there that kind of allude to that, but that's not true. It was created by a higher level, the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm is the higher realm. And God Himself being the centerpiece of the spiritual realm, He being the Spirit that created by faith the things, everything that we see around us. I'm seeing trees right now. I'm seeing all kinds of stuff around us. They were made in the molecular structure by the Word of the living God Himself. Now that's found over in Genesis 1. We went through that last week. God went out and He said, then He saw. It goes through this whole 6-day process of God creating things. And it's almost redundant, but He's trying to get the point across to us right here that God said something and then He saw it. See, natural man and our natural reasoning, our natural mind, we want to see something and then say it. But that's not how faith operates. No, we say and then we see. We say something just like God did. This is the God kind of faith that we're using right here. We've received the measure of the God kind of faith, Romans 12:3. And this is how this faith operates. Not by seeing first, externally, and then saying. We can say it, that we see it internally in our hearts first by hope, and then we say words of faith. We release that faith, and then it causes it to come to pass. You say, well, again, that's God. Well, God said in Genesis 1, toward the end of that chapter that I was referring to, 26 and through 28, that God said, let us make man in our image and according to our likeness. Now, first of all, that means we're spirit beings because God is a spirit being. But second of all, He also created us in His likeness and in His image, meaning that we have the ability to use His faith the way He uses them and get the God kind of results. In other words, we can say this. We can frame our world with words of faith. Now, those words of faith, of course, originate from God. They're not just something we dream up, but it's something that originates with God, gets on the inside of us in our heart in abundance, and then we speak those same words out of our mouth. I know there's a preacher that said it this way. The Lord said this to him one time this way. I love this. He said the Lord said this to him, and it's not an audible voice. You understand? It's just internally in your heart. He said, my words in your mouth are just as powerful as my words in my mouth. God speaking that. And that is true. Because why? Because they're God's words. We're putting ourselves in agreement with what God said and what God believes. And everything goes in agreement, cooperates, and then it comes to pass. We can frame our world through this kind of faith, believing and speaking. That's all the time I've got for today. Join us again tomorrow as we progress on through this week. And if you'd like additional resources and materials, go to tonycowan.org. We will see you tomorrow.